So today I'm working on my MQB Volkswagen Tiguan. This is my family hauler. So I'm going to be going ahead and changing out the rear brake pads and rear brake rotors. It's actually a pretty simple process. There's a couple little Volkswagen specific things, but it's actually not a difficult thing to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, and you'll see that pretty much anyone with basic mechanical competency can manage to do it. So like any other brake job that you've ever done, you have to first break the lug nuts loose and remove the wheel. Now, if you've never worked on a Volkswagen before, they have these weirdo covers over the lug bolts. There's this little tool in the back with your spare tire that allows you to remove those. So you just kind of like hook it in here and it pops right out. This job is fairly simple. It just has certain eccentricities due to it being a Volkswagen, right? So if you're accustomed to Japanese cars, and especially, you know, Japanese cars and American cars, especially modern ones, where everything's metric anyway, then working on one of these may throw you a little bit, but it's not actually necessarily hard to work on Volkswagens once you understand their eccentricities. They're actually really simple to work on. It's just certain annoyances, insistence on using Torx bolts where you would normally just use a hex head, things like that are pretty annoying. But other than that, there's some of this that's actually really easy. Like for example, I'm going to show you, this rotor comes out without you having to remove the caliper bracket, which is one of the sweetest things on any brake job ever. I wish more of them were like that. So at this point, I took off those covers. All I got to do is take a 17mm socket on a breaker bar, and unfortunately these tires, I changed them not that long ago, which means that some guy at a tire shop is the one that torqued them on, which means that it's about to be a pain to remove. So I've got a nice long breaker bar, and I'm gonna take them out. Oh my god, let me apply the parking brake, otherwise I will not be able to break these loose. Alright, I got all 5 of those broken loose. Man, if you work at a shop, like, what is the need of taking a stupid air tool and cranking the heck out of these screws? That was way above the 100 foot-pound torque spec. 103 foot-pound, I want to say, for this vehicle. Right. All of these are loose. Good. Good. Now, I'm going to jack up the truck. So, like any other car, the jacking point on the pinch weld, and that part is pretty straightforward. Alright, so I got the wheel off, I got the car jacked up. I have a jack on the pinch weld, and I have a jack stand. Never ever trust a jack to do the work of keeping your car up. In the event that the hydraulics fail, you could be seriously injured or killed. So always have a jack stand. In my case, I've actually left the jack and the jack stand together. As you can see, I got my jack here, got a jack stand over here. I lowered it so it's resting on the jack stand, and then I just gave this a little bit of a pump so it's held up. There's really no place for movement in the event that this fell. Jack stand is doing its thing, nothing's gonna happen, right? So always do that first, especially in a brake job where you could be sticking your head in here. Rotor could guillotine you. Yeah, don't ever trust that to just a jack. Alright? Alright, so now this part should be fairly familiar to most folks. You're gonna go ahead and remove this retainer clip thing. Easiest to do with a plier. You just grab it and yank it out. Alright, so come with the pliers, grab that, and it's out. Now, there are 2 bolts which have to be released so that you can get this out and put the new pads in. So there's a little plastic cap here that you got to remove, and on the bottom there's another one. Having done that, you now run into Volkswagen eccentricity number 1. Right, there's a brake line here, right in line with where you have to insert a tool to remove this bolt. Right, so you're going to need an extension in order to kind of space your tool out so you can get a socket, wrench, and work back here. And this is kind of going to be in your way the entire time. And it's just something that you have to be aware of. Now, this isn't really an eccentricity of Volkswagen because a lot of manufacturers do this, but this isn't a hex head, obviously. This is, you know, it's an Allen head bolt. So you're going to need an H7 metric Allen, right, head socket in order to remove that. So go ahead and do that. And on the bottom you don't need an extension. On the top you do. So just keep that in mind as you go into this. Alright. It also sucks because I have a set of hollow wrenches that I'm used to using. I can't use them here, and then like the one normal wrench I have is not in the greatest shape. I gotta buy another set of sockets. That's definitely something I'm gonna do this year. Alright, so we're gonna kinda get this guy in here and wrestle with the brake line. Alright, I'm in, and luckily these don't get torqued too much. This is manageable on the driver's side. It really sucks on the passenger side because the geniuses decided to route the fuel filler, right? Like the literal tube that goes from your fuel filler down into your tank is on the other side, and the pipe gets in the way of where your socket wrench ends up. So I just did this now pretty easily. It's 10 times harder to do on the other side just because you're wrestling with fitting it in space. Not because it's an actual difficult thing, just because it's senselessly laborious because they decided to overcomplicate things. Of course there's a ton of thread engagement in there, so expect that to be a little bit of a nightmare to release. And then because there's a brake line in the way, it's extra work. So even when it feels so loose to the socket that you would think you could turn it by hand, you actually can't. And it's just really stupid design. Like someone literally just couldn't be bothered to do a better job of this, and that's how we ended up with this nightmare. But honestly, once you're past this part, you're past the stupidest part of it. On both sides, really. Now, if you watch the video that's available, I want to say from FCP Euro, well, there's a couple of things I hate about that one and another video that are available. Is one, the guy from FCP Euro talks forever instead of getting down to the nitty gritty. And sometimes you just want to get something done and you're just like, dude, just show me how to do it. Right? It's freaking annoying. So he talks and he talks and he talks before he ever gets around anything. And then he also tells you that you need this, you know, this like programmer device, whatever, in order to release the electronic parking brake so that you can compress the piston in the caliper. That is 100% not true. You do not need that. And I'm going to show you why. You can just take apart this thing using a couple of H5 Allen head bolts and then turn this thing clockwise all the way in using a 9mm socket, and then you can compress the piston and put this all back on, pump your brake like any other car, and once you put your rotor and pad in, and this works like any other car. So you don't need to go buy some fancy expensive programmer. Don't let people fool you. I'm sure if you have that programmer, it's maybe easier because you have obviously the one less step of having to remove the little piece, but it's really not hard enough that if you didn't have the programmer, you'd be forced to do so. So if you don't have it, don't stress it. All right, I'm getting the lower bolt now. I learned that from, by the way, that little trick from another video. A gentleman explained it, but he also took 10 years to get to the point and reveal the simple thing that I just said to you. oh yeah, you're not gonna need that programmer, you're gonna blah blah blah. He gives you like a 30-minute spiel before you get there, and it's just like, dude, like just show me how to freaking do it, man. I'm out here, I already have all this stuff apart. I just need to figure this out right now. I don't want to hear you talk for a year, right? Like, get to work. So I already revealed the secret. If you are doing this and you're more ahead of the part where I'm at right now, go ahead and just do it, you know? All right, so I pull these two bolts out just so they're not in my way. I will probably grease them before putting them back in, right? But at this point, this thing is loose, which means that I can do one of these, just kind of work it back and forth, and there go the crummy old pads. These are not that bad. On my other side, they were completely worn through on the back end, right? And the back end was rubbing metal on metal with the rotor, and I was getting this absolutely horrible sounds every time the brakes were applied. So that's why I had to do this job. And in all hilarity, on this side, both pads have worn basically even. So I'm not sure what happened to the other side that the inner pad just wore super uneven. It's almost as if they changed the brake pads and forgot to change the inner and just changed the outer. But whatever it was, it sucked to deal with. It's fixed now. All right, so now I have this rotor here. I want to remove it. So here comes something that's not a Volkswagen eccentricity. A lot of manufacturers do it. Right here, there's a Torx bolt that holds this rotor on. Now, a lot of people will argue that this is done in the factory in order to assist assembly of the brake setup, right? So they'll put the rotor on, bolt it here so it's steady, then they can bolt the caliper, bracket, and all that without so much drama. And so they'll say that it's not necessary for you to put this back on. Me personally, I kind of agree with that notion, but it doesn't do any harm to put this back on. So I take it off and I put it back on, you know, and it helps you when you're putting this all back together anyway. So let's remove this rotor. Now, it's probably crusted on there, so we're gonna have to tap it, and that's pretty normal. Let me grab a small sledge. All right, so I got a little sledge. Tap. Rotate it. Now it's loose. So here comes a Volkswagen eccentricity that benefits you. Normally, you have to unbolt your caliper carrier in order to get your rotor out. Not so on this Volkswagen. You literally just go like this, rotor's out. That is fantastic. So much less work on you. And if you didn't know that, you would particularly freak out because there's a very annoying Volkswagen eccentricity, and that's the fact that this caliper bracket is held on in the back by these big, like, Torx bolts. Right, like they're round on the outside and have a Torx in the center, and that's how you remove it. And you probably do not own a Torx big enough to do that. Most people don't, and it's just weird and stupid that they did that, and they should have used a hex head bolt like everybody else. But they were kind enough to absolve you from the need of dealing with the nonsense by actually just making this so you can take the rotor out without doing that. So let's move to the next phase, which is going to be cleaning up this hub surface, greasing it, then getting the new rotor prepared. Just take a wire brush, kind of rub this crap off. It smells corrosion. I don't know why manufacturers don't make this stuff out of something different. Do a better job of coating it with something. They just leave raw metal from the factory and all rust. Maybe it has some kind of slight coating in the parts that survive shininess, and then it gets eaten off. Who knows? Even on a brand new car, you deal with this, so. At this point, I've scrubbed that off. I'm going to go ahead and just take some grease, right, and rub it all the way around, soaking all that rust and grease so that, one, we reduce corrosion in this area, right? Further incidence of corrosion, and two, so that the next rotor comes off much easier the next time you have to do this job. That, and honestly, just, I hate rust. So I like to grease stuff up wherever I can to keep more of it from forming. And you don't need a massive amount, it's really just a small bit, and you just kind of make sure that you spread it as evenly as possible throughout, and that's all good. I like to get some into the threads too, because about the worst thing is one of those stupid bolts dripping in there. It helps just make it easier to take the lug bolts out, and the little hole here for the torque screw, because you don't want that torque screw seizing, then you gotta drill it out. It's a pain in the butt. Sometimes they're made out of aluminum and it's not that bad, but if it's steel, it's gonna suck. I think the Volkswagen moves in. Okay, so with that done, we're gonna go ahead and clean up our new rotor. We're gonna put the rotor on, bolt it down, then put in our new pads. So this next phase here involves gloves and some rags and brake cleaner. Every single brake rotor, when it ships, is coated in an oil or grease of some sort, and that's really just to keep it from rusting in transport. So you're gonna go ahead, do this outside. This stuff smells terrible. Soak both sides. This is running out of spray and it has a lot of liquid. Right, then you're gonna wipe it. Alright. There are certain types of cancers associated with breathing solvents, so, you know, try not to breathe so much of this crap. Did that, now this is clean, let's go put it on the car. Alright, so at this point, we want to take our new rotor, kind of align, more or less, where the Torx bolt goes, but focus more for now on popping this guy on. Right, and there's where the Torx bolt goes, it's nice and aligned. We're going to go ahead and take our Torx bolt and reinstall it, specifically so that that doesn't keep happening. Don't tighten the crap out of that, just, right, lightly put it on. No need to go crazy with it. Now, here's the part where we have to pull some trickery. And that is the part that I mentioned where we need to pull out a hex, 5mm hex, and take some stuff apart. So, if we grab our brake caliper, so our caliper back here actually has a couple of screws, right, that hold like this cap thing. It's very hard to get a good shot of this. Let me try to move this around and see if we can't get you a view of it. So, as I was saying, this thing here, right, this back cap is held on by a screw down here and another one on the opposite side, and those are a 5mm hex. Let's go ahead and undo those, then I can show you guys what you do so that you don't have to buy a fancy, Lord knows how expensive programmer in order to do this. Okay. So, take, yep, it is a 5mm hex. Alright, take the 5mm hex and just take those little bolts out. Kind of sucks to do, but it's whatever. It's not on with a lot of torque. There's one. This socket is falling apart. Okay. Take one out. Socket wrench. Then the other bolt is exactly on the opposite side of the assembly. Again, major pain because of the wires and the brake line, but not necessarily the hardest thing, just a little laborious and annoying. Alright, just want to break that loose. What's nice is once you do have those out and you take this apart, you get rid of the problem with the wire, so you have a lot more room to move this thing around. Alright, so took those out. I do not need a screwdriver. Alright, so there we go. Pried that nonsense off. Now you see there's this little like motor looking thing. Take your 9mm socket and just thread this all the way down clockwise. Right? As soon as you do that, now you're able to squish this piston in, but I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this before I do that. Alright, so I had to slightly rotate that part with my hand in order to get this to mate back up, but now I'm just going to put both bolts back in it. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to squeeze the piston in, and we're going to put our new pads in. So let me just do this. I'll kind of do this off camera. Another random thought is this doesn't really get threaded down super tight. You can basically just kind of snug this up by hand, right? And then maybe just give it a tiny little turn just to snug it up. You want to kind of do a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other side, just to get it to come down evenly, right? Because you're kind of just threading down a seal. You don't want to apply a ton of pressure here. This is not, right, something that needs to be on super tight. And those screws are made out of some kind of soft metal, so you will probably cause yourself a problem if you overdo it. You might strip them, etc. So just don't overdo it. Take your time, just lightly put it on. So this is ready to rock. Let's drop the brake pads in and then squeeze this as well, and we're pretty much ready to go. So you could use a C-clamp or you can use an actual brake piston clamping tool, both of which I own, and neither of which I can ever seem to find whenever I'm doing a brake job. But fortunately, I can always find my wood clamps, so I do carpentry as a bit of a hobby, and wood clamp does the job more than well enough, you know? There we go. And go ahead and just squeeze the piston in. Just rotating this by hand. The piston will go, it should be pretty soft. It's not something crazy, so just squeeze it all the way down so that you don't have to fidget with this in order to get it back on over the brand new brake pads. You'll know when it's seated because it really won't go much more than that. That's it. So I squeezed it all the way in. Leave it supported here on this control arm. Let's do our pads. I'm going to take off these gloves and switch to a clean set. It's because I don't want to get any of this stuff dirty. Alright. So, the brake pads, pretty similar except one has this little weird springy thing. That one, if I'm not mistaken, goes toward the inside. And the other one goes here. Right, having slid them both on, they just slide on in like the nicest way. A lot of pads are finicky to come on. These are very nice that they just slide on. And then just pop this on, put those two bolts back on, and torque them down. and then this entire thing is pretty much done. You put your caps back on, you put your wheel back on. Of course, this upper one will suck to do because the brake line is in the way, but that's just life when you're working on an eccentric vehicle. But it's not, like I said, it's not the end of the world. It's a nuisance, but it's not necessarily hard. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, you don't need a nuclear physicist level of intellect to figure it out. It's just an annoying thing that you just have to keep in mind, that because you bought a Volkswagen, it is what it is. But you can perfectly work on these things. People that like claim that these things are hard to work on, like, I think they're just letting themselves get fooled by the hype. Like my boy Milton, that got rid of his Golf R, manual Golf R. Last year they made a manual. This man got rid of that thing. That is foolishness. That car is going to be worth something one day. They're not making the manual anymore, man. Well, oh well. Let's get these guys in. Okay, that one aligned. This one sucks to do because the stupid brake line not being located in a logical position. Having done that, I go ahead and put this clip back in. A lot of pads come with new ones. These didn't for whatever reason, so I'm just gonna reuse the old one. It's not the end of the world. If you can get a new one, it's preferable. Big fan of these clips. I always feel like they're a needless pain in the rear, but okay, I guess do the bottom first and then do the top. Outside it's all in. Something about the way the caliper is sitting is still bothering me. But let me turn the vehicle on and pump my brake, and then apply the e-brake and see how I feel about it after that. Look at the other side and see how it looks. I mean, it can't be on wrong technically, but I don't know. I'm that type of person that I want to double check the heck out of everything. Maybe it's something from going to engineering school and you have to double check your calculations 20 times before you turn in your exam, but I'm that guy. Alright, so at this point, all I'm going to do, I'm going to torque this with my breaker bar. I'm going to torque these down and then I'm going to hit it with my torque wrench. Now I can't go too crazy because I realized from the Camaro that doing this by hand, I'm more than capable of exceeding the 140 foot-pound torque rating for the Camaro lug nuts, which means that the 100, I want to say 103, just over 100 that these take for the Tiguan is well within my capability. So I'm just going to go to a feel snug, and I'm going to do it in a chair to minimize how much I can put my body behind it. Just go to a feels about snug. And I'll set my torque wrench and I'll go ahead and put it down with the torque wrench. So I'll torque these down and then go for a spin. next one. So like I said, very easy for me to reach 103 and exceed that by a lot, even exceed 140 with my bare hands. So either way, there it goes. It's on. Let's go for a spin. So I took advantage and put air in my tires while I was working on that, and then I went for a spin in the Volkswagen, and everything feels fantastic. As a matter of fact, after I got back on my driveway, I tried going in reverse and like smacking the brake real quick just to see how it felt, and the braking was awesome, like very effective. Everything feels very nice. So it's all taut, nice, clean, exactly how it needs to be. So I'm very happy with how that came out. If you have a Volkswagen, or you just have a car and like working on your cars, or just generally enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you're notified when I post up another one. I'll be doing a ton more stuff like this, especially now in 2025. I've got a lot more content coming around this, so feel free to stay tuned. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave that in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys for watching.